Hey, it's Ryan Speltz, and welcome back to another episode of the REConnect Podcast. Today, I am blessed to have Thommy Sandvick on, and his purpose, as he stated before we started, was to walk the path of love and share the journey with others who want to do the same. And I love that the fact that you're in real estate and your purpose has nothing to do with real estate and everything to do with real estate. So, Thommy, tell me a little bit about kind of how you formulated that sentence and where it kind of came from.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I've been following what you're doing and just absolutely love it. So I'm super, super excited to share this and really draw this out and give the voice. So thank you. So I think it really came from I had a business, an e-commerce business. I grew it to $500,000 in a year, and I made some decisions in that business out of fear, and that caused me to lose that business. And as I kind of was evaluating, a couple of things happened after that, and I was just like, something in my life just isn't working. I'd been entrepreneur for quite a while. I had the taste of that freedom, that drinking margaritas on the Mississippi while you're making money kind of thing, quote unquote passive, as some would say. And I just, like, something wasn't working. I seemed to be in a downward trajectory, and I effectively started down the personal growth path, not within the realm of religion or even really at the time spirituality, but just like, how do I become better? Something's going wrong here, and it's not going the way that I want. And so over the course of several years, as I started to explore, like, find my authenticity and then really figure out how I can help others, ultimately I just landed on the one core foundation of it all. And I think that being that we're all love, and that is really, there's love in the absence of it, and that's really all that there is. So then it becomes like, well, how do you apply that? And I think at the core, in trying to build a business, I recognized that I was often be after I got all this authenticity and I started to lean into this concept of, like, true love and deeper connection with people and compassion and learning how we process information and just finding that ability within myself. The challenge I had with it was when it came then to turning that into, all right, now let's go, like, we have to survive. So like, let's start with surviving, right? And then let's thrive. So I went looking for, in this entrepreneur journey, and the challenge was everyone was teaching me strategies to grow that made me feel incongruent with love. It made me feel out of alignment. Then I get out of alignment, I get stuck, or I'd hustle really hard and get stuck. And so it just, one thing led to another, and I figured out how to put the two and two together and say, well, can you build a business on love, generosity, and appreciation? And I found a great mentor, Michael J. Mayer, who helped me with that. So that's a long story, a little less long, ultimately. But it's there's certainly many points within that, but it's kind of the overall arc of kind of how I found my authenticity, and then I had to figure out how to apply that in business, and then ultimately be able from there to invite others to come. I have to walk the path and then invite others down that same path, and recognize that that's really the true underlying journey that we're on in business and in life.
Yeah, I think that's so huge, and I think a lot of people miss it at the start, right? And it's not something that you can't just stop and start over. Like it's at any point, any day can be day zero for you in that journey, and like to for you to bring that in, especially bringing that in to real estate instead of bringing real estate into that. I think that that's huge for people to recognize is like if you can start with that, or if you can restart yourself with that and find out who you are. I think a lot of people don't even know that piece, right? Like they come into the business and they try to be the business instead of
Yeah,
allowing the business to be themselves.
yeah,
And it's such a big like turn left, really. Like you're going down the wrong path if you're trying to fit into someone's business model instead of creating your own. And a lot of it to me is lack of this out there, lack of the messaging supporting that concept, right? Because all we see is the guys that are doing the multi-million dollar condos and selling all the luxury stuff because they're the ones with the money to push the message out. So now you've got these people as the people that others are following as examples. And I always talk about, like, especially with social media, right? Like, people aren't
Mhm.
interacting on social media. They're just posting and disappearing because
Yeah.
that's what the top of the food chain guys do, right? Like, you're following Kim Kardashian. She doesn't interact in her comments, but do you think that she was good at social media, or do you think she was famous and that's why she's good at social media? Like, that's,
Yeah.
they have the other aspect that you're just completely ignoring. So bringing that purpose into that is fantastic. You mentioned something about the love, or the way you said it was the love and the absence of love. And you also mentioned the fear-based business model. How did those kind of fit in? Obviously, love and fear for me are direct opposites. How did
Yeah.
you recognize, like, at what point did you recognize that, like, man, I'm incongruent here? Because you said that word as well. Like, what was the defining moment of going, man, I can't do this anymore. I got to change something.
Um, the defining moment was when had I was out. So at the time, I was actually with an insurance brokerage, and I was doing group healthcare, and I was still like I had found that desire for doing things with who I am and leading with that, and I was out door knocking in the Florida sun to small businesses, and I just got done with it, and I said, I can't, like, I'm not going to do this when I'm 50 years old. And I believe in mastery, right? So you've got to find the thing that you want to master and then go for that. And if I'm not going to master it, I'm not going to put the effort into it, or I'm not going to try to master it. So I just said, like, something like I've got to find a different way to get where I want to go. And the fear there in leaning into is it's such a different method to build a business by infusing these values into it. And but my back was against the wall. Later that year, both of my cars went into repossession. I was really, really suffering financially. And like they say, when the back is against a wall, then you just really have no choice. And so I kind of had to lean into the things that felt most right and learn to trust the process of that. Um, and I've had times since then, it never really goes away. Like, fear never goes away. You just have to learn to dance with it, recognize it, and ask yourself better questions to push through it. And I've had times even fairly recently where there was immense fear, just so much in so many different ways. And everyone around me who cares for me trying to pull me back into comfort. And that comfort being like, go back to corporate America, right? Go get a job at the security thing. And I was like, no. Why? I look in the mirror and I ask myself, what is the next level of growth and contribution? That's my way to ask the question to push through the fear. Because if I'm coming from growth and contribution, there can be no fear. And then I took a bunch of action from that, and we're still going.
Yeah.
The
No, and
car,
I
right?
think, yeah, I think you're great at just like taking the action, like you said. And then we talked pre-show about having this initiative to get on more podcasts and get out here and to
Yeah.
have these real discussions, right? Because, and I think that that's part of the wave of the podcast activity now throughout all of the marketplaces is like these conversations are things that people used to have behind closed doors, right? Like these are conversations that we would have to help you discover your purpose or to help me. Now we're bringing it to everybody, and everybody can help discover their purpose. When you mentioned that, like, the fear is there. There was an interview that I saw between Gary Vee and I can't think of his name, but he's a pretty funny creator on TikTok. He does a lot of solo videos and like does sports videos where he goes out in the backyard and like films himself tackling garbage bags and stuff like that, like he's a football player, and it's really funny. But either way, like Gary asked him, he's like, if you could look back, before you started or on day one of this journey, what would you tell yourself? And the quote was, fear is afraid of you too.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
And I was like, goosebumps thinking about it, because as soon as I
Yeah.
heard that, I was like, oh my, this is the best quote, because you just said that thing in different words, right? Like, you
Mhm.
have to continue to approach the fear, and that's what people don't recognize, is when you approach it, it backs off, and then it
Yeah.
goes and finds a new place to try to get into you. And you're saying, like, where is the growth in the contribution piece? That is, in a nutshell, that's like, why is this triggering me? Why
Mhm.
am I fearful of this?
Yeah.
And when you really sit down and you go and you ask that question of yourself, sometimes you're not going to like the answer, right? Because you've got to leave that comfort zone to even be able to attack it. But on the other side of that is, a lot of times it ends up being, this is triggering me because I'm actually afraid of growth.
Hmm.
It's not that I'm afraid of failing. I've done that, right? You had two cars repossessed. You've done that. Like, what
Yeah.
else is there to be afraid of? Like,
Yeah.
there's, you hit that bottom, and that, coming out of that, I think that gives you an amazing perspective on the way that you move forward throughout your business.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, there's three things that you fear. You're so right. There's three things you fear: fear of the outcome, fear of loss, and fear of the process. So it's identifying where first what that is. And like you say, this it's almost becomes a fear of success or the fear of the growth. Because you think to yourself, am I gonna leave someone behind? Right, because of that. Like maybe that person who may even be super close to you isn't going to come with you down that journey when that next level of growth comes, right? Or is it just worried that it's not going to work out, or the process is one, overwhelm comes in there when it's like, okay, I'm in overwhelm because you're just afraid the process is going to be too hard and you just don't want to face the process. So therefore, when you look at anything that people do in terms of, maybe they're getting rid of alcohol or getting rid of something, sugar, it could be anything that's comforting. You say, well, the process will be too hard, so they just don't start. And then and you're right, it comes back around in so many different ways. The fear, like new level, new devil, as they say, like it always comes back around. And so, which is why keeping love at the forefront is always what's so impactful, because when you're operating there, it allows you to always keep the focus there. And, fear is, I think in many ways, it's selfish. What is fear of the phone? It's selfishness. It's now in the right context. If you don't want a cold call, right? And because you don't want to start a relationship by bothering someone who didn't want you to call, that's okay. But when it comes to calling people that already like, know, and trust you, the phone shouldn't be heavy, right? It comes from a fear of relationship. What are they going to think? All those stories that we create in our head that holds us back from serving at higher levels ultimately.
And that's I always challenge, whenever real estate agents, like, why do you deserve the business? Well,
Mhm.
because I'm the best agent for the job. Well, why are you the best agent for the job? Well, because I would take care of them and I'd actually care about them instead of making them a number. Great. Then why aren't you picking up the phone to tell them that? Why
Yeah.
aren't you putting that messaging out? Why are you doing the same thing that Zillow does on a daily basis, putting out only listings on your Facebook page? Like, do you think that you can compete with Zillow? Because that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, you're making a list of things that people can click on, is all that is. So you said to stay in the love piece, and this is where the challenge comes in, right? Because and you said you want to share the journey, so that's why I'm
Yeah.
asking you about the journey.
Yeah.
How do you continue to cultivate that day after day? And I know at some point it kind of, because I'm on my journey, it kind of kicks in eventually, where you're just like, you default to that.
Hmm.
But when you're coming from that fear of the change, right? Because when we change from being transaction based to being the love based or love forward, or however you want to say that,
Transformational. I like this.
exactly, we're going to start dropping off. The business is going to tank because you're doing something different, and there's very little way of keeping the business at the same level at that point. So that's the piece, right? Like, how do you cultivate love when you're seeing those numbers just continually drop for a few months while you start this new journey? How do you cultivate that?
Oh, in that particular scenario, which I've definitely gone through, not as a real estate agent, but just as building a business in that transition, it believe it or not, I really feel it comes from the ability to learn to let go of what you fear to lose. Yoda. I mean, I've leaned into Star Wars so much since COVID, and I'm just like, oh my, the truths that are in this series is
Right.
insane. It's so it really is learning to let go. And look, we'll make a story in our head. So there's a transition happening, and the transactions are going down, and there's the fear of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I'm not going to get, the money's going to get tight. I'm going to lose my house. My family's going to suffer. All these different things. It's really is almost learning to be okay with the worst of whatever may come, and doing that inner work. And then from that place, being able to learn to trust the process. I had a coach that was effectively saying, like, okay, you're in this terrible spot. So what are you going to do to get out of it? And, he wanted me to do the very numbers driven transactional stuff. And I said, I don't know, but what I know is love, generosity, and appreciation never fails. And within 30 days, I had an opportunity come that completely changed everything. So it really, is there a particular strategy or something? It's really, what are you filling your mind with? Finding the thing that resonates with you. When I was in the absolute hardest times, I leaned in so much on listening to, I mean, I would spend 2 hours in the morning binge listening to audio about love. I choose Abraham Hicks personally, but whatever floats your boat is fine, but I was just doing that to just garner more understanding. And that helped from the mindset perspective. And then I think from the strategy perspective, if you have a strategy to communicate with people, right, then that is in alignment with these values. Then day by day, it gets easier. And day by day, you start to find more progress and build more belief. I think there's a saying, now it's a book, but I knew it before that, but it's, focus on the gain and not the gap. And I think recognizing that in the process is really important. So anyway, so I'll stop there. Get me going.
Yeah, yeah, I mean that's a big piece, and I know that that's a struggle for many, because
Yeah,
while we feel like we have to become comfortable with giving everything up, it's almost like, but we've got this much, like why would I give up this much? And they don't recognize, the old adage of pull the arrow back to launch the arrow, right? Like you have to go backwards to go forwards, because
yeah,
you can't just, and I like to make the physical movements of, and I know you can't see this if you're listening, but I cross my arms over my chest and like now try to catch a ball.
yeah,
And you just can't do it, right? And so the only way you can catch a ball is if your hands are open, and that means you're not holding on to anything. And the expectation of my sister's cousin's uncle knew that I was a real estate agent and used somebody else goes away, because you just it's so crazy to watch those Facebook posts anyway. But like those people come in, they're like, hey, this person knew I was an agent and didn't use me. Like, yeah, but they probably knew seven other ones too. But being able to just represent, like, I'm giving you information and it doesn't matter if you use me as a real estate agent or not. This is me presenting what I know and putting it out there.
yeah, exactly. And that also actually, with that concept, so you say, okay, walking the path of love, and then infusing that into business. So if generosity is love in action, appreciation is love in reaction. And the biggest thing, if you're going to infuse love into the business, one of the biggest, we're a lot of us are naturally givers. Like we will give and give and give and give and give. The real challenge for most people is learning to be an appreciative receiver. And how many times does someone say, "Oh, I'll pay for the meal," and they go, "Oh, no, 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 it's okay." I have no problem saying, "Thank you. I appreciate that," because I'm an appreciative receiver. I'll get them back later, but I'm not going to do this back and forth thing. You're blocking the reception of what could come your way. And really learning how to infuse that into business, that is the challenge of transitioning from the transactional model to the transformational model, is that ability to be open to the reception and be open to the ones who do resonate with you, therefore, and not worrying about the ones who don't.
Yeah, and that was my next question, was kind of how do you find the people, because the final part of your purpose statement there is the to share it with the people who want to join you. And the question becomes, how do you find those people? And I
Yeah.
know how I would answer, and I think I know how you're going to answer, but like, how do you, like, that's the question, right? Like, how do I go get those clients? How do I find those leads, as we say with quotation marks? Where are those people and how do I get to them?
Oh, yes. So that is absolutely the best part of this entire journey for God, since 2000, early 19 now, events in your local marketplace. And the events, when the spirit of an event is we're raising money for charity and we're hosting this event because instead of pouring the money into either giving it back to Zillow or making Zuckerberg richer or whatever villain you want to utilize, right? In the whatever resonates with someone. The point is, instead of giving the money out there, I'm pouring the money into all of you, right? I'm appreciating my community at my event by pouring in, and I'm able to do that because of your referrals. So thank you in advance for your support, confidence, and trust. And what happens in running these events rooted in these values, ultimately, you just start to attract generous, appreciative people. And next thing you know, after as soon as a year, which seems like a long time, but it's really not, you can find your entire tribe has shifted. And that's one of the fears people have, again, is learning to let go. People come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And sometimes you've got to recognize that and be okay with, as you grow, learning to let go, right? So that can happen. How do you find those people? Attract, inspire, and grow a tribe of generous givers and appreciative receivers by being a generous giver and appreciative receiver. And learning to master that, they will find you. And not only will they find you, but your business will then be built on a foundation of brick rather than on sand, which is what happens on the transaction treadmill when it's just always going for the next one, but there's never any real focus on a long-term relationship with the clients.
Yeah, and that's what Reconnect is all about, is that connecting back with your clients, with your coworkers, with the other agents that are not even in your brokerage, all of that. And that's, like we talked about pre-show, that's what's missing right now. And people aren't recognizing that that's missing. And it's such a problem for everyone to be just running around trying to get that transaction. And then, we know something's not working when 49% of the agents are closing 0 or 1 deal, right? Like, that's glaring statistic of it's not working. And we're seeing these top 5% people in their companies that are closing 12 deals. Like, that's top 5%, 12 deals a year. That's one a month. Like, it's a great living if you're in the right market, but that's just blows my mind that can be what's considered to be the top of the market. And it's because we're just so disconnected. It's like, this is what the goal is. So I do have to ask you one big question.
Okay.
And this is one I've been kind of throwing in at the end of every episode.
Okay.
And the question is, what is one of the largest global challenges that you wish to resolve and or work on?
Oh, I think in generically, it's conflict, right? But what is conflict? It's learning to understand someone else's point of view. So I think the biggest problem we have in the world, in the human population, in the entire race, is judgment. And I think again, my mentor Michael J. Mayer says, "Get out of judgment and into curiosity." And I think if we would learn to be in curiosity a lot more about others, about where they come from, about what forms their viewpoint, we find more commonality than we recognize originally. And I think that's the core thing. We've got to get out of judgment and start listening and having these conversations and sitting with people across the aisle and having open dialogue without getting angry and attacking, but actually coming from that place. And we'll find that we really all just want the same thing, which is to love and be loved. But we just disagree on how to get there at times.
I love it. That's a huge issue, like you stated, and I can't say it any better. So I'm gonna just leave it with you. So, but Thommy, I appreciate your time today, and I think we've got a lot of good points here that we're gonna be able to pull out and kind of utilize in that way. And so, greatly appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we can help out with some of your friends and get their names out there as well, and look forward to
Absolutely.
continuing a future relationship with you.
Cool. Awesome. I love it. Thanks so much for having me.